Hi, my name is Nesterova and I'm a reporter at Mediazona. Do you remember how happy we were when the big prisoner exchange happened? On August 1st, 2024, 16 people were released from Russian prisons, foreign hostages and political prisoners. One of them, co-chair of the Memorial Human Rights Organization, Alexei Gorinov, told us that as soon as it became clear that it's an exchange, everyone who was brought to the Moscow airport asked themselves, where is Alexei Gorinov? But Alexei Gorinov was not on the exchange list. He remained in penal colony to serve his sentence, almost 7 years for spreading fake news about the Russian army. Many people hoped for this exchange back then, and not only because by that time the 63-year-old political prisoner no longer had a part of a lung, but also because we knew that another criminal case had been started against Gorinov. And just recently he was convicted for the second time. They not only increased Gorinov's sentence, but also toughened the already unbearable conditions of detention. He was transferred from a medium security to a maximum security prison to spend another 5 years there. Before the arrest, space engineer and satellite specialist Alexei Gorinov was a Moscow city councillor, a colleague of politician Ilya Yashin. On March 15, 2022, in the first weeks of the war, at a regular meeting of the district council, a leisure plan was discussed. Councillors had to vote on a drawing contest for Children's Day and dances for Victory Day. Gorinov called it savagery.
Вот скажите, пожалуйста, о каком конкурсе детского рисунка может идти речь? Или об организации танцевальных, приуроченных ко Дню защиты детей, или об организации танцевальных программ, приуроченных к Дню Победы, когда у нас каждый день гибнут дети. Я для информации скажу, что около 100 детей погибло в Украине, дети становятся сиротами. И внуки и правнуки участников Второй мировой войны сейчас брошены в пекло этих боевых действий на территории Украины. И я считаю, что вот все усилия гражданского общества должны быть направлены только на то, чтобы остановить войну и вывести войска России с территории Украины. Вот если бы пункты планов были посвящены этим вопросам, я бы с удовольствием проголосовал. А в таком виде я лично голосовать не буду, а дальше на ваше усмотрение.
For these words, Gorinov received 7 years in a penal colony. For the court hearings, he prepared anti-war posters. On them he wrote, "I am against the war," or "Do you still need the war?" At the time of the first conviction, Gorinov was 60 years old. In the pre-trial detention center in Moscow, his health began to fail. A month after the conviction, Gorinov wrote that it was difficult to him to breathe, he could not eat because of constant coughing, but the prison doctors didn't even examine him. Alexei is missing a part of his lung, which causes aggravation of lung diseases. Pneumonia, bronchitis, even a common cold gives serious complications on the lung. It's totally impossible to treat yourself in pre-trial detention centers in Russia. Without a local doctor's examination, you have no access to medicines or even vitamins. Each pill is authorized by a medical officer. But even with authorization, it's still a quest to get the drugs. In Moscow pre-trial detention centers, there are only 2 hours a week when someone can bring medicines to inmates from the outside. Many prisoners wait weeks or months for their prescribed medication. It got even worse for Alexei Gorinov in the penal colony. It's only a couple of hours drive from Moscow to the Vladimir region where he was supposed to serve the sentence. But the transfer is a total nightmare for prisoners and their relatives. While a person is being transported to the colony, they have no contact with relatives, no normal food and sleep. Gorinov's health deteriorated so drastically that he was brought to the doctor in the colony by other prisoners. He simply could not go himself, but the doctors would not even examine him. This did not seem enough to the prison administration. 2 months after Alexei Gorinov was transferred to the Vladimir penal colony, the guards began to deprive him of sleep. He was put on the register as prone to escape and checked. The checks look like this. Every night, a prison officer approaches a sleeping person, turns on the camera with a loud "It's being recorded," and shines a light on his face. After another month, the abuse reached a new level. The orderly, a prisoner who is given a little extra authority by the colony administration and usually brings letters from the censor to another inmates, began to read aloud Alexei Gorinov's letters and discuss them with fellow inmates. It was only due to the public outcry that this was stopped. Then the administration put into action a well-tried and reliable scheme of pressure on political prisoners. Time after time, Gorinov was sent to Shizo, a stone solitary cell where there are no personal belongings, no parcels, and no relative visits. You can't even stretch your leg there. But the highlight of the program, of course, was the new criminal case. Many of you probably wondering how to bring a criminal case against someone who is already in jail. Well, this is also a well-established scheme in Russia, and with Gorinov it played out like clockwork. In December 2022, Alexei Gorinov's defense managed to get him transferred to a prison hospital. He almost recovered when on December 31st he was put in ward with recidivists. By the way, according to the law, a first-time convict must be shielded from such company. On January 1st, a TV was brought into the ward and propaganda started to broadcast non-stop. Gorinov spent the New Year holidays in this environment. During this time, he had 3 pairs of neighbors in the ward. And in each pair, one of the prisoners was always aggressive and persistently provoked Gorinov to discuss news about Ukraine. The second, on the contrary, was silent. He had a wire hidden under his clothes. In Russian prison jargon, such characters are called hands. Gorinov was recorded continuously for several weeks, even when the prisoners were taken to the toilet. But they were able to find only 2 phrases for the prosecution. Well, they blew it up, so what? There is a war going on, Gorinov said about the attack on the Crimean Bridge. And he replied to a cellmate's words about the Azov battalion. Why do you call them scum? This is their armed forces. According to Gorinov himself, he was not much of wordsmith. He was busy answering letters, and the conversation seemed suspicious to him, like, I quote, an interrogation with an investigator. But even these 2 phrases were enough to accuse Gorinov of public justification of terrorism. Of course, you may have many questions. Where did they find terrorism? Where is its justification? And how can it be public in a 3-person ward of a prison hospital? But wait, there is more. The indictment says that Alexei Gorinov is a supporter of nationalist ideology, has a negative attitude towards the residents of Crimea, Donetsk and Lugansk regions, favors the forcible return of Crimea to Ukraine, and supports not only Azov, but also the Ukrainian intelligence special unit Kraken. Gorinov did not say any of these words in his conversation with the hands. When he pointed this out in a conversation with the investigator was frank. If he had not put these words in the documents, the case could not have been opened. It should be said that even the hands in court admitted that they had not heard anything of the sort from Gorinov. Although during the interrogation the investigator had written all the necessary wording in the protocol for them. In court, 3 out of 6 of Gorinov's neighbors from the ward were questioned, those who had conversations with him. The neighbors who wore wires were not even summoned to court. A few words about those whom we did see there. The first one, Pavel Britikov, was in prison for robbery, not the first in his life. Another participant of the provocation against Gorinov is Andrei Ganyashin. He is serving 16 years for drugs and keeping a brothel. The third one is Nikolai Medvedev, who did not want to answer why he was in prison, but we learned from the interrogation report that he was convicted for rape. I'm talking about all these details to make it clear. The prison administration had means to put pressure on the hands. It worked. In court, they spoke about the horrible and unpatriotic things Gorinov had told them. They were confused by their own words, but diligent. When the prosecutor asked them in court why their stories differed from the protocols of their interrogations, they replied that they simply forgot. But they had no answer why all these protocols were exactly the same, down to a comma. Fun fact, we never heard the transcripts of Gorinov's conversations with the hands. They were announced behind closed doors, and journalists were thrown out of the courtroom. Gorinov himself joked that was done so that we would not listen to the awful language of his neighbors. But I think the reason is that this conversation do not incriminate Gorinov in any way. But they do prove that all of that was a provocation. The lawyer told us that one of the Gorinov's neighbors on the recording reports to someone he addresses as Measure. As a result, the prosecutor Svetlana Regalova asked to sentence Alexei Gorinov to 3.5 years in a penal colony. Judge Roman Vladimirov gave a little less for decency and sentenced Gorinov to 3 years. He added it up with Gorinov's previous sentence for spreading fake news, and the result is 5 years in a maximum security prison. Alexei Gorinov, despite his broken health, held himself stoically. He came to the court with an anti-war poster again, and the name tag on his uniform, which all prisoners wear, was covered with a piece of paper that had a drawing of a peace sign on it. He turned his closing statement in court into an anti-war speech, very vivid. But Judge Vladimirov did not want to listen to it, and in the middle of the speech simply left the courtroom.
Необходимо добиваться прекращения войны. Я в полной мере выразил свое отношение к этому мерзкому человеческому занятию. Могу лишь сказать, что насилие, агрессия порождает только ответное насилие. Вот истинная причина всех наших бед, наших страданий, наших бессмысленных жертв, разрушения объектов гражданской и промышленной инфраструктуры, наших жилищ, наших семей. Давайте прекратим эту никому не нужную бойню, ни нам, ни жителям Украины. Не пора ли оставить наших соседей в покое и заняться нашими своими внутренними проблемами, которые нарастают, как снежный ком. Мы уже давно доказали всему миру, что какие мы храбрые, стойкие, миролюбивые, но, может быть, уже хватит.
For some reason, the prison authorities in the Vladimir region particularly likes to torture Alexei Gorinov with cold. Last fall, they simply kept him in a cell without heating and mockingly turned on the radiator only before the visit of the Public Monitoring Commission. Right after the second sentence, they went further. Gorinov was not only held without heating, they also didn't give him a blanket. Media pressure helped once again. After news broke about the new form of torture, the radiator did start working. Perhaps after my story, you will want to ask why they put in so much effort into torturing Gorinov. He has already been convicted, and Gorinov asks himself this very same question. I don't understand why they're picking on me, an ordinary person, he said before the first hearing of the new case. The truth is that I don't know. Maybe it's simple inertia, they're just used to it. Maybe after the first verdict they wanted to break and gag him, but when that didn't play out, they sought revenge. It's really impossible to break Gorinov. Yes, I admit that in court it was obvious that it was very hard for him. But he did not complain. Only when he saw journalists for the first time in almost 3 years, he said, I just have no chance to get medical treatment here. And that's all. Gorinov also commented stoically on the prisoner exchange in which he was not included. I was happy for the guys, but this freedom is conditional. They're outside their homeland. They are decent people, they represent our country. I did not believe that our country could go to such lengths, to exchange some of its citizens for others. I have information that Ilya Yashin is very worried about me and he's trying his best to get me out of here. But I have never relied on it. I don't know if there will be more exchanges and if it will be possible to save Alexei Gorinov from prison. And I certainly think it is wrong to torture him with vain hopes for an exchange. But I definitely think it is right to give Gorinov as much support as we can. Please write him letters, but please do it in Russian. It's the only thing that distracts him in the colony from the gloom around him. And this is what reminds the administration of any colony that we remember about him, worried about his fate, and do not leave him alone with the system, no matter what those prison bastards come up with.